Welcome to Break and Enter with Jahan Kalantar and
Tracy Chen.
where two lawyers from very different worlds talk about what they have in common. And today's episode is about
You!
me. Yay! Well, it's actually about crime, but I mean,
It's about Jahan's world today.
It is.
Exactly, Jahan's world. Okay. Look, when I studied law, criminal was always so fascinating me. It's like actually the sexiest area of law.
I agree.
Okay, can you explain to me why criminal law and explain to all of our viewers for people who don't understand anything about the criminal law, explain about it and how it works.
Okay,
Because
so-
the test is very different.
Yeah, so the criminal law is a fascinating area of the law. It basically, most people's lay knowledge comes from television because they've seen a lot of American movies and shows.
Judge Judy.
Judge Judy. God bless Judge Judy. Just as an aside, she has scared so many people into hiring lawyers with her demeanor. I mean, she's God,
She still looks great. What do you think?
100%. She kind of reminds me of my mum when my mum's pissed off. Like she's got that same energy. But the criminal law has been really informed by a lot about television. And secondly, it's something that everyone has an opinion on, right? Justice, crime. Whenever you tell someone you're a criminal lawyer, they all lean forward. And when you tell people you're a lawyer, they usually lean back. So it's interesting because people always have this experience of it. And I always say that the work of a criminal lawyer is relatively simple. It's not easy, but it's simple. We always follow the same process, which is we have reasonable doubt. We have the presumption of innocence. It is never our job to prove anything. It is the job of the state to prove any and all allegations they bring. And so what happens is when you're charged with something or an allegation is made, there's a number of elements that go into what that charge looks like. We go through those elements. If any of the elements are missing, you win. If any of all the elements are there and you have a defense, you win. If you may have done it, but they can't prove you've done it, you win. And so the first thing I try to get at by the end of the first conference is this going to be a plea of guilty, plea of not guilty, or are we going to try to deal with it in some other way, like a Section 14 or a mental health argument? That's it in a nutshell.
Right.
So going down those paths, everything, a lot of stuff will happen, but it's relatively simple because there's only so many things that can happen. But the practice of criminal law is really a masterclass in improvisation and a masterclass in battlefield medicine. Like I do not think, and I've gone to court for about 4,000 clients now over the course of my career. I've never gone to court and it's gone exactly the way I thought. Sometimes I'll show up and, oh my God, there's a surprise witness that somebody will try to plea in. Or I'll show up and my client will be wasted, which has happened. Or I'll show up and something will have gone in some way, shape or form different to what I've expected. And it's given me a very good ability to think on my feet and be pretty good at dealing with uncertainty.
There's two areas that I never fully understood, even though I studied the law. So the first one is, when a jury has to make a decision based on those elements, right? So let's just say there's 5 elements, and 4 they said, he's pleaded guilty on that, and there's only 1. If there's any uncertainty on that, they win, right?
Yes.
So how does the 4 not
Influence the 5?
Yeah.
It's amazing because generally speaking, no matter how complex the case is, you'll often find it will come down to one thing that needs to be determined. So I'll give you some simple examples. In a drug importation case, almost always the thing that is in question is whether the person had knowledge that there was drugs being imported. We won't be disputing that there was drugs, that they crossed a border, that they're unlawful to possess. It's a question of whether they had knowledge. A very common one, tragically, in sexual assault cases is consent. Did the person consent and did the other person know they were consenting? In violence cases, it's usually self-defense. So there is usually a lot of agreement on what happened, but there will be a lot of disagreement on one particular element. And that's why it's so important to study and understand the law and understand how those particular elements work, especially in practice. We are part of a division called the Common Law Division, which means a lot of the way that we interpret the law is based on how other people have interpreted the law. It's a concept called precedent or stare decisis, which I'm sure you're familiar with. Maybe our viewers aren't. But it's about we treat the same thing similarly. And so we have to become masters of seeing how the court has dealt with this in the past in order to understand how it moves it with it forward.
Right. Interesting. Okay. And my second question was, just give me a second. I just need to think of what it was now.
That's all right. Take the time.
Okay. It was that. It was a very good one. Oh yeah, one of the things that people think is criminal lawyers lie. They lie for their clients. So if a client definitely murdered someone, you're lying to say that they didn't murder someone, which is not the case. But can you please explain how that actually works?
Yeah, look, if the question is, are all criminal defense lawyers the most ethical and upright people? Of course not. Same with any profession or anything. But as a general proposition, I think many of us, most of us, the vast majority of us take our ethical obligations really seriously. And the biggest ethical obligation we have is to be officers of the court and to make sure that the court can take what we say honestly. And so in that respect, we would never lie. Now, it's very important that we understand that I certainly understand that it's my job to help as many people as long as possible, and I can't do that if my reputation is in some way, shape, or form compromised. So I would never compromise my reputation for anyone. If you come and tell me, Jahan, I murdered that person, there is a lot of stuff I can't do for you anymore. I can't say that you were somewhere else. I can't say someone else did it. But I can still put forward what is called the stop advance defense, which is you cannot prove beyond reasonable doubt that you committed the murder. And that's why I encourage clients to be honest with me. Sometimes clients come to me and they'll tell me, I did it, I'm so ashamed of myself. And they'll tell me a story and I'll be like, well, actually, no, you didn't commit any offense technically. You never, for example, you may have borrowed a vehicle completely intending to return it and therefore it's not a larceny. Or you may have been acting in self-defense, albeit excessive self-defense. And so just be honest with your lawyer, because I will work with you to ensure that the version that we give the court is the truth, but is done so in such a way as to highlight the things that we say, because this is an adversarial system. The prosecution's job is to make sure that they discharge their burden and to make sure you're punished appropriately if you've done the wrong thing. It's my job to be beside you, helping you, and if I don't know, I can't help.
So say, for example, it is a murder. And then
I've never done a murder case. I've done attempted murder a number of times. I've done terrorism, but never murder.
Let's say attempted murder. There's 5 elements.
Yes.
So whether the client has admitted to you whether they did it or not, you're trying to prove that 5th element is not there. But
yeah.
And
potentially. It sometimes there's a number of them. So a case I did some years ago was essentially, it was alleged that essentially an item, it was a street sign. I'll give you the full details. Why not? It was a street sign found in my client's possession. They allege he stole the street sign from the street. His version is, nah, I found it. It was somewhere. It was discarded and I had it. Now, a lot of the police's case against him was based on he stole it, he took it. But the reality is that they could not establish who actually owns that, or 2, that he took it. We claimed that it was abandoned property. You can pick up abandoned property, right? If there's Tracy Chen Street and you see it on the ground and you look up and you're not on Tracy Chen Street, you're nowhere where it can be reattached. There's an argument that it's been abandoned. And so that case was one where they argue the battleground for what the prosecution thought was completely different to what the battleground we said it was. And so it's up to you to understand the rules of engagement, play fairly, but also play to win. You're dealing with people's liberty and their reputation. They have an obligation to have a lawyer that thinks cleverly and within the rules, but
within the rules. I think that's the most important
Absolutely.
part. That there's no lying or anything that's involved. It's what element is actually missing here. And it's similar with migration law when it comes to certain documents. If those ones not fraudulent, then we're still going to try and prove it.
Your job for your client is to put forward their best possible case. And if that involves, saying, hey, these are 9 documents you've given me, I'm going to push on these 7 and these 2 I don't think are as relevant. I actually think that's your job. Right? As long as you're not making up documents, the gemstone file, or, you're okay. But it's also about having integrity in what you do, right? Like I go to sleep at night knowing that I don't lie, I don't cheat, I don't mislead. I try to be honest because you need to sleep.
Yeah.
It's
a lot. You're still young. You still have a couple of years ahead of you.
Well, there's what is it? There's no pillow as soft as a clear conscience.
Yeah, that's true. One very interesting, I'm fascinated about how the police work, and I'm sure you know a little bit about how the police work. All right, let me tell you a scenario that my friend told me about, and I thought it was really fascinating. So one day she was at home, and the police raided her place. And she was in there, and they were going through everything. They showed her the warrant and everything like that. And in the garage, they actually found a box of drugs. But those drugs actually belonged to her boyfriend at the time. It was boxed, and the police even talked about how there was so much intent for the boyfriend. Now, she was obviously the owner of the house.
Yes.
But how come she wasn't in charge? How come they didn't bother to arrest her or anything like that?
There's an interesting principle in the law called filipetti. Filipetti is a fascinating case that comes from essentially, it was a share house where drugs were found in the share house. And the law states if you find drugs in an area that is common, you cannot necessarily automatically assume those drugs belong to one person or another. Now, I don't know if her boyfriend put his hand up to take the rap. I don't know if they had other evidence that linked it to him, which is why she wasn't involved. I don't know if it was simply the Filipetti principle. But there are these safeguards that are built in, and I'm guessing she didn't give a statement.
She didn't give a statement, no.
Yeah.
She really genuinely didn't know what was going on. But at the end of the day, it was her house, so it was very interesting that they didn't try and involve her.
Sometimes they do. Sometimes they may use that to invoke pressure on him. Maybe he put his hand up and said, "Look, these are my drugs, and this is the situation." Every situation is slightly different, and the answer almost invariably is it depends. And what it will depend on is what evidence they do have. And that's why I always tell people, be polite, but do not in any way, shape, or form assist police in putting you in jail. Don't do it. Why would you? You don't have an obligation to. There's a presumption of innocence. That's not to say you. The best thing to do is not commit crime, right? Right, but don't commit crime. But also, you have no obligation whatsoever to assist the person that's trying to put you in prison. In fact, it's almost silly to do that. So exercise the rights that smarter people than us came up with: the right to silence, the right to seeking legal counsel. Exercise those rights. They're important.
So if I was to get arrested and they take me in, what do I say?
I'm very sorry, officer, but I don't speak to police without the assistance of a lawyer. Please call my lawyer and friend Jahan Kalantar, and then you would call me.
That's the one.
And then
What's your number?
Hey, look, it's all over the internet. If you can't miss it. You cannot miss it. I'm more available than any McDonald's.
Good one. Okay, and can you tell me about one of the most fascinating? And then criminal stories are always so fascinating. Tell me about one fascinating.
Oh God, there's so many, right? It's been a journey, but there's. I think what I really love about my job is how every single day is different, and one of the ones that I still think about. It was my first ever hearing, and essentially, my client was a fairly old woman who had assaulted another very old woman. And on paper, it made no sense, right? Like basically this woman had crash tackled another older woman and like struck her when she was on the ground. And so I was like, why did you do this? And my client said, well, she was about to cast a curse on me. Now in their community, they believe that certain elders have special powers. And one of the powers is they can cast a spell that essentially makes you infertile. And so I'm sitting there going, this is just nonsense, right? But you have a duty to put forward your client's case. And so I said, I got signed instructions and we go to hearing. And so I'm cross-examining this poor old woman who's been assaulted. And I said, so you have magic powers, don't you? And the prosecutor was so taken back by the stupidity of this question, didn't even leap to his feet. And she says, yes, I do. And I'm like, what? Okay. I didn't expect that. Okay. And I said, and you can cast curses, can't you? She's like, yes, I can. And by this stage, we're all intrigued, right? Because now he can't object to me raising something completely ridiculous because there's a very legitimate basis for us. And I said, you were going to cast the spell on a hex on my client. She goes, yes, I was. She deserves not to be able to have children. She's awful. She's this. Now, if you believe someone can make you infertile, you are allowed legally to stop them from doing that by hitting them to the ground. And so we were able to get a really good outcome for her.
Wow.
And it reminded me that I live in this bubble where my version of reality and reality may not be the same. There are people who believe in hexes. There are people who believe in magic. And so I think one of the beautiful things about this job is it really opens your mind up to a world you couldn't even possibly imagine.
Wow, that's incredible.
Thank you for you're the best. Thank you for interviewing me. I hope
have so many more questions, but it's okay. We'll save it for next time.
There's going to be more episodes.
Yeah,
and if you are watching this or listening to this, please give us 5 stars wherever you listen to your podcasts. Make sure that you subscribe, review, and ask us any questions because we love to interact with you. Thank you. Bye.